going for a nice walk in the woods just near my house. So why am I doing this? Well, I wanted to talk to you today about trees. Trees. Don't we all just love trees? I actually really love trees. I think they're fantastic things. What's not to love? Not only do they balance oxygen and carbon dioxide in our fantastic atmosphere, they also create habitats for our wildlife. And as a designer, they are a really useful and often quite cheap and importantly sustainable method of producing products. So for example, there are millions and millions of products that we make from different types of wood, and as long as they're from sustainable sources, they're a fantastic resource. So I just want to talk to you about two key types of wood, and these are things that you're going to need to remember. Okay, so two distinct types of wood that we generally use in design and engineering. So the first one is softwood, and the second one is hardwood. Okay, so we can put most woods, natural woods that is, into one of these two categories. We're going to focus on softwood first. So softwood comes from trees that are called coniferous. Okay, and coniferous trees are trees that keep their needles, or keep their leaves if you like, all year round. They're called evergreens. Okay, so they never lose their leaves. And an example of a coniferous tree might be a pine tree or a fir tree. If you think about a Christmas tree, that's what you're thinking. So if you come around here, follow me. We've got a few different types of trees in this part of the wood. But what you see here is this tree here. Okay, so this is an example of a coniferous tree, and you can tell coniferous trees because during the winter they're the only types of trees that still are green. Okay, so they don't lose their needles throughout the year. Okay, and we might think of them as Scandinavian because typically they're grown in the sort of northern hemisphere, in the Arctic Circle, and they're beautiful. Spruce, fir, pine. Okay, so I want you to remember softwood made from coniferous trees, and think of Christmas trees. And Christmas trees are trees like fir, pine and spruce. Okay, so that's softwoods. Now what I'd like you to do is have a little look up here. Now this is a very sad looking tree, because in the middle of winter, this tree, as you can see, has absolutely no leaves. I know, it's too sad. But these are the sort of hardcore of the trees, if you like, okay? So these are what gives us hardwoods. And hardwoods come from deciduous trees, okay? Now, deciduous trees are probably trees that we, in our country, we see more commonly. Okay, so they're the trees that are beautiful and full and green and leafy, and sometimes they have blossom during the spring and the summer, and then during autumn their leaves die, they turn that wonderful sort of orange color, and then they drop off, and then we're left with what looks quite depressing during the winter, quite a sparse look. Okay, now these trees are actually, although they don't look very happy during the winter, they are much slower growing, and therefore they are hardwoods. Okay, and they are typically more expensive than softwoods to buy, and they are typically used for more higher end products, just because they are, you know, harder to work with. They've got a grain that tends to be closer together, and that's because they grow slowly. So, types of deciduous trees, we have oak, we have beech, we have ash, and there are many, many more. It's really important that you can remember at least two of each type of tree. So, we're going to have a pause point now, and in that pause point I've got some key questions to ask you. So, question number 1. What are the 2 main natural types of wood? Question number 2. Where do those woods come from? So what are the 2 types of trees that the 2 natural woods come from? And then the question number 3, name an example, or let's say 2 examples of each of those types of trees. The extra challenge is to explain what happens or doesn't happen to the leaves of those trees during, or all year round, or during the winter in particular. So there's your pause point, lots for you to remember. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. Hello, me again, the mad tree lady. I just so happened to be on my walk again, and I managed to spot 2 trees right next to each other that can demonstrate exactly the difference between the 2 types of woods and types of trees that I've already been talking about. So I wonder if you can remember, I'm not going to do a pause point, but if you can remember them off the top of your head straight away. Good, I'm glad you can. I'll just trust you on that one. So if you can't, a quick recap. We have the types of trees that stay green throughout the entire year. Okay, and these are called coniferous trees. Coniferous trees. And we've got a really beautiful example of a coniferous tree just here over my shoulder. And this is a Scots pine tree. And I was trying to think of a way that you could always remember what coniferous trees were. So these are the ones that supply us with the soft wood. And it's actually true that coniferous means to bear cones. So come over here and I'll show you what I mean by that. So these types of trees don't have flat, broad leaves, okay, like other trees that we might see in this country, but instead they have needles, which I know I've shown you before, but what's even more exciting about this one is it's got cones. Okay, so if you can remember pine cones or fir cones, if you think about those, they're very sort of Christmassy, festive sorts of things, then you should be able to remember coniferous or coniferous. Okay, so these are coniferous trees. This is a pine, but you do get other examples like fir and spruce, effectively Christmas trees. And the difference between this tree that provides us with softwood, and softwood is one of our main sources of wood for products, especially when we're designing things in school, because it tends to be a lot cheaper to buy, and that's because it grows much faster, which means that we can have sustainable growing forests that are replenishing the wood just as quickly as we're using it. So it's a bit cheaper and it's a little bit easier to work with in lots of respects. Not all hardwood is harder than softwood. That's a common mistake that lots of people make, but in general, working with something like pine will be much easier than working with something like oak, because it is softer and harder. So let's come over here. So here's another beautiful tree, and you can see the stark difference between these 2 trees, one being lovely and green and the other being all bare. And this one is a birch tree. Okay, so it's an example of a, can you remember? A deciduous tree. And a deciduous tree provides us with hardwood, and these grow much slower. And that's effectively because they sort of, if you like, they almost hibernate during the winter, as you can see. This one is a silver birch, and you can see the reason for that name, because it has this beautiful silver bark on the outside of the wood, which is absolutely stunning. So you can see that there. So we know that the bark is the exterior of the wood. Hopefully that's something that you're familiar with already. And when we're processing and using wood, the bark will be removed before it is sawn and it is planed, so that it's basically ends up like a block of wood like this that we can then use in the workshop. And if you're wondering, why is this crazy lady out on probably the coldest day of the year in the snow doing this video? Well, I don't really know. Guess I'm a glutton for punishment, but do you know what? It's really good to be out in the fresh air, and I highly recommend, especially for all of us who are at home either virtually teaching or virtually learning, I recommend that you do so as well.